From the 1500s to 1877, the history of the United States has gone through a series of changes that are relevant in today's society. Learning about US history since my younger years, I was amazed at how much more information I learned in this course. Here, I would like to share with you 5 events that stood out to me the most. In the 16th century, the Spanish took over the indigenous peoples of present-day New Mexico, who they called the Pueblo. They converted the indigenous people to Catholicism while destroying community buildings and religious statues. After years of Spanish control, the Pueblo people had enough. A Puebloan religious leader by the name of Pope conducted the Pueblo Revolt of 1680 against the Spaniards. According to Chapter 3 of the American Yawp, the Pueblo people killed 400, including 21 Franciscan priests, and allowed 2,000 other Spaniards and Christian Puebloans to flee. It was perhaps the greatest act of Indian resistance in North American history. This was significant to my understanding of US history because it tells a story of the bravery and perseverance of Native Americans by finally putting a stop on Spanish rule. The story illustrates that when people are being oppressed, there is no wrong reason for them to stand up for themselves. This was interesting to me because oftentimes it would always be about the colonizer's successful attack on the oppressed. On the other hand, uprisings or revolts by the natives is not always highlighted in history classes. As a Filipino, I can definitely relate to this because Spain also took over the Philippines for a long time. Just like the Pueblo people, a lot of Filipinos also revolted against the Spanish. Looking at the attacks, one can feel the frustration as a result of years and years of seeing countless women getting raped or enslaved men being forced to do physical labor. The Pueblo Revolt of 1680 really is one of the significant events in US history. The transportation of slaves from West Africa to the New World was known as the Middle Passage. According to the lecture video titled Slavery in Colonial America, it was a long and traumatic voyage for the slaves because they had to endure densely packed and unsanitary spaces. Wherever they were in the ship, in any position, that was where they did their business. This contributed to the spread of different diseases like yellow fever, malaria, measles, and smallpox. Aside from this, since women were separated from the men, the captain and the sailors were able to sexually exploit them. Some resistance happened but were unsuccessful. This is significant to my understanding of US history because it shows how cruel people can be. They did not care if people were exploited as long as they can earn big money. Sometimes this part is skipped by history books and they immediately jump to the lives of enslaved people in the plantations. But I think it is important to highlight this part of history because sometimes it is easy to say that the cruelty of slavery began in the plantations, but in reality, hellish treatment started way before they set foot in the New World. The traumatic experiences aboard the ship were very shocking. Everything about it was inhumane, and I'm just trying to absorb the cruelty that was happening inside the ship. I keep asking myself over and over, how can a person not feel sympathy for these poor individuals? From 1692 to 1693, a number of people in Salem, Massachusetts were accused of witchcraft. It all began when two young girls named Abigail Williams and Betty Pears started acting very strangely. A local physician confirmed that an evil hand was controlling the girls. As time went on, more and more individuals were showing same symptoms. Then the accusations began. Three women were accused of witchcraft: Tituba, an enslaved woman, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. This led to multiple people being accused of witchcraft, which prompted the Salem witch trial. According to the textbook The American Yop, Chapter 3, paranoia swept through the region, and 14 women and 6 men were executed. 5 other individuals died in prison. The article I chose for my AJA review, titled Satan's War Against the Covenant in Salem Village 1692, written by Benjamin C. Ray, dove more into the events that happened during the trials. The article depicted how the laws of the United States have changed through the years. Spectral evidence is a testimony where the evidence is from a vision or a dream. The acceptance of spectral evidence to prove that a person did a crime is unheard of in modern society. However, during the Salem witch trials, the judges accepted such a claim as hard evidence. The idea that church and state were separated did not exist yet during that time. The church was the foundation of a Puritan lifestyle, and their laws were very strict. If any person did anything contrary to their moral codes, a severe punishment was received since they committed a sin. This showed how the Puritan religion was very influential in their government and therefore affected their justice system. I found that the Salem witch trials was very interesting because it reflects the difference in how people of that time diagnosed odd behaviors just like what the girls exhibited. They immediately concluded that an evil hand was the cause. As I put myself in the shoes of the Puritans, I would have felt scared because anyone can be accused of witchcraft, especially if a person has a troubled past with someone in the community. I cannot stop but connected with how some individuals of our society would call the cops on someone accusing them of being a dangerous person just because of their race and skin color. As a person of color, this is something that scares me, and I just hope that our government would take this issue more seriously. In the early 19th century, there was a shift that occurred. This change brought the country together. To be more specific, there was a change in the American economy. New inventions were created which made the lives of Americans much easier. The biggest invention was the cotton gin by Ellie Whitney, which I learned from Chapter 8 in the American Yop. The production of cotton used to take a really long time. However, with a cotton gin, it was easier to separate the cotton from the seeds and stem. Therefore, the production of cotton was a lot faster and larger. This part of the US history was when the economy benefited so much from the sweat of the slaves in the South. Cotton became the cash crop of the country. Even if the inventions helped the economy, it resulted in the need of more slaves and made it harder for the abolition of slavery to take effect. This was interesting to me because even if slavery was in the South, northern states still benefited from slavery. This is because the cotton that was being produced in the South was needed by the textile companies in the North. Many Northerners were opposed to slavery. However, they could not deny the fact that their economy was also dependent on the back of the slaves. In 1830, the Indian Removal Act was passed that gave the president authority to begin treaty negotiations that would give American Indians land in the West in exchange for their lands east of the Mississippi. After a number of negotiations, the Cherokee Indians were forced to move from their homelands. Based on Chapter 12 of the American Yop, harsh weather, poor planning, and difficult travel compounded the tragedy of what became known as the Trail of Tears. 16,000 Cherokee embarked on the journey, only 10,000 completed it. This was significant in my understanding of US history because it was President Jackson that had the belief that the government was acting in the best interest of native peoples. From one of his speeches, he said, "The removal will separate Indians from immediate contact with settlements of whites and perhaps cause them gradually, under the protection of the government, and through the influence of good counsels, to cast off their savage habits and become an interesting, civilized, and Christian community." This reveals the psychology of people in power of that time, that they are superior, so everyone else should follow them because they are the ones that will make America great. It was shocking because the respect for other people's ancestry and culture apparently did not exist during that time. People like Andrew Jackson came in and ignored how the Indian tribes were connected to their lands. The memories of their ancestors were tied to that land. By taking that away from them is the same thing as totally erasing their identity. The cruelty was very much evident because we see the land expansion of the country, which benefited the economy. But the Indian tribes had to be humiliated for this to take place. Throughout the years, these events has taught people to have compassion, sympathy, and empathy for one another. These are the things that can help end divisiveness in society. If individuals will give each other a helping hand, then we can rise as one.